Welcome back to another episode of Turning the Tables, and I am your humble host, Adam Lamb. Typically, Jim Taylor of Benchmark 60 joins us today, but I think right about this time, him and his wife must be welcoming their very first child, so that's really exciting. We do this hashtag Lunchbox live stream every week here on Thursday at noon. For some reason, I put in 12:05 start time, so I apologize for that. And I'm happy to announce that Turning the Table is now officially a podcast, and it's available on iTunes, Spotify, and everywhere that you get your podcasts. On this show, we talk about staff-centric solutions to restaurant operations, and it's a short show, 30 minutes. It's meant to give you a big punch in the mouth, something to think about, and hopefully take back into your operation and test, because we're all about making these solutions live. We don't want to just talk about them. We want to make them happen in our industry. And today I'm very happy to welcome to the show Chef Jonathan Ruby, who's also a solutions expert with Benchmark 60. Morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Wanted to make sure that before we go any further, I mentioned that this show, as always, is sponsored by Benchmark 60. Jonathan is one of our solutions experts, partners with Benchmark 60, and he brings a wealth of experience, not only as a chef, but also as a restaurateur, operations manager. And Maya Thomas is excited because finally she can see us. And Jonathan, let me just start up and ask for the folks in the audience who perhaps don't know you as well as they should, can you give us kind of a little thumbnail sketch of your background and some of your early influences?
Yeah, sure. I'm fortunate. I grew up in the restaurant business a little bit. My grandparents had a couple places when I was growing up. They had a pizza place. It was kind of like part pizza place, part convenience store. And then they also had a seafood restaurant, having been from Nova Scotia. So, as before I was even probably legally allowed to work, when I was like 10 to 12, I was bussing tables and washing dishes and helping them with prep. So I kind of began my admiration for the restaurant business, having gotten to see the culture, especially the culture in the kitchen. And they're all, a little bit like pirates back there. And it really did kind of solidify my passion for that. I just turned out I loved cooking. So at that point, I did work experience, got jobs in restaurants when I was in high school. And then at that point, I went on to the Culinary Institute of Canada in Prince Edward Island here in Canada. And that was just that was a great experience. The first year was fantastic. I was really kind of ahead of the curve, having had that past restaurant experience. And so it really did, it gave me a little bit of an edge. That's kind of like what I teach a lot of the people, is that school really, I got to really maximize my education with my past restaurant experience, because when everybody else was still learning the brunoise, their first onion, I hammered through that and then debone a pig's head kind of thing. So right. From there, I joined the Junior Chefs Association of Canada. I became an alumni representative for our school. I met Michael Smith, who's kind of a local Canadian celebrity chef. He used to chef at large, chef at home. I helped him launch The Very Best of Chef at Home, his cookbook, as well as I helped him at the Athletes Village for the 2010 Olympics in Whistler, which was a really great opportunity. From there, I kind of just went on to work at a few Michelin star restaurants, notably Le Bernardin in Manhattan, which kind of pigeonholed me as a poissonnier for a little bit. But I was happy to do it. Love it. Love seafood. And I moved around from island to island. I lived in the Caribbean for a little bit, in Saint Martin. And then, I lived in Victoria, beautiful Vancouver Island here in Canada, working at some high-end resorts and stuff. And then also, I did some globe trotting, trying to, test the waters of different Michelin star restaurants, and really kind of my pursuit of that, ingredient knowledge and technique. Hofga Cleve was one of those places that really was, it kind of transformed my approach to food. And my obsession with bread, with that amazing bread cart they have there. So, just a little snapshot. And then throughout my life. I ended up here in Edmonton, Alberta. I actually came here to get shoulder surgery, and next thing you know, I'm a restaurant consultant. So, yeah, it's been great. I did transition my career at one point. I had a daughter, and I realized that, like, spending time with her and spending time with family was just as equally, it became just as equally as important as my career. And my career was kind of, at the forefront of everything at the beginning. So and at that point, I had started meeting some corporate executives for different restaurant groups and got into food development and kind of more big picture thinking when it comes to the restaurant business, which then obviously had me question a lot of the things that we were doing. And, and that's what segued me into the consulting business or working with Benchmark 60 was that the hope is to build a better restaurant world. Yeah.
And congratulations on the birth of your daughter. How old is she now?
She's 6. She's going in grade 2. So she's turning 7 in October. But yeah, so it's been a little while. Yeah.
And what's her name?
Isla. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. And previous to the show, we were talking a little bit, and we thought we might discuss the demise of the toxic culinary culture, or as we're planning it in our crazy little ways.
Yeah.
Do you remember in your career being kind of victimized by a toxic work culture? Or I know Canada is a much softer and sweeter place in a lot of ways. I'm married to a Canadian, so it's constant conversation about, how different the cultures are between the United States and Canada. But I'm just curious if you could kind of reflect on culture within the back of the house environment that didn't necessarily seem so supportive.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the restaurant industry is not primarily dominated by Canadians. So I think it's a pretty good mix of, different cultures and different backgrounds when it comes to how we approach culture in the business. And so I definitely have experienced it. It's that kind of that old adage where it's, back in my day, or like, when I was coming up as a chef, they weren't that nice to us, which was true. Like I've seen a myriad of things. People were still throwing stuff around. This was kind of the heyday of Gordon Ramsay, really, where that was the culture. Like chefs were hard ass and they had a hard line, and it was say yes, chef, and do it. And show up if you're not 15 minutes early or late. And some of it's not bad. Some of it's was character building. But I definitely experienced it. I didn't even know what the word meant. I was called Malacca for the first, as a teenager, and I didn't even know what it meant. That's what they called me in the kitchen, but it turned out they were calling me asshole the whole time. So yeah, it's unfortunate. It was just all that I ever knew at the time. As it was coming up, it's definitely been a significant shift, right? Because the workforce is not willing to put up with that kind of stuff. And the way that we kind of suffered through it.
Where do you think we draw the line between, say, character building and abuse?
Well, just there is no line. It's just one or the other. It's not okay. I don't even really understand why it was okay or where that stemmed from. And it likely came from, just stress, whether it was like money or trying to boost cover count, or likely it was just a bunch of people who had their own, struggles or had gone through their own level of abuse. And it was just the way that, give on to others the same way that they had received it. So, it is a pretty, I think it's a clearly defined line. It was abuse, and it is. And I think for some reason it was just like kind of, I don't know, accepted as part of the industry. But I'm happy to say that it's not like that anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I know things have been changing for a while, and also there was, they say that changing culture within an organization takes about a minimum of 7 years, and the industry is a big old battleship, and nobody ever turns the battleship on a dime. Is there anything that you can point to in your career when you decided that you wanted to make the industry a better place? And if you can just help me define what better means to you.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was just as equally as subject to that punitive sort of nature that I grew up in, right? Like that's what I was taught to do. Like you just say yes, chef, and do it, and it doesn't matter what my demeanor was, or it was all about food focus. And I realized as well too, though, that I personally wasn't getting what I wanted out of the business. Like I wasn't, I didn't have the work-life balance. I was saying no to all the family events and the weddings and all that stuff. And I was working 80-hour work weeks, and I was tired and I was grumpy. I didn't like people that didn't do well at their jobs. Like it was just a punitive nature. And then all of a sudden I realized that all the things that were affecting me in my life and the things that I didn't necessarily like about our industry was something that I could change. Like I could offer that to the teams that worked for me. And you likely heard it as well before. I didn't necessarily want my daughter to join the restaurant industry. Like I'd met other guys. Like there was a guy I recently hired whose dad is a chef. He's a pretty notable chef here in this area. And I asked him, I'm like, hey, do you want to become a chef like your dad? And he said, well, my dad has one rule. I can be whatever I want except for a chef. And it's one of those moments where I was just like, this isn't right. Something that I'm so passionate about, so fiercely in love with. I didn't want that for my daughter, which I was a bit of a disconnect for me. And I said, why does it have to be this way? And that was really that pivotal moment for me. Is I wanted the world for her, and why can't this be one of them?
Right.
It's almost limiting, really. Yeah.
And to get back to trying to create a better industry, like to you, like in real terms, what does that mean?
Well, I think even just looking statistically for Canada, the job vacancy in our industry is about 14%. But if you also look wages are up, but they're up about 12%, which for all of us restaurant operators, that's a significant increase. But if you look at the stats overall as a business, we're the lowest paying industry, one of the lowest paying industries out there. Like it's just not attractive anymore. And that's where I wanted to try to see if we can. Not everybody's getting the same level of education. There's not always, not every position is transferable to different restaurant groups. I think there's a little bit of disorganization with our industry. And I think that if we work together more, do more of these podcasts, reach out and speak more as a community, I think we have an opportunity to make that shift for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're completely aligned in that. You're now working for Benchmark 60, and before I just jump off, Jemiah Thomas just put in a thing that said, we make up most of the economy. I think the restaurant industry still is the #1 employer in the world. So it's kind of weird that the largest single employer or industry in the world does such a poor job at equity, whether that's equity in pay, equity in position. I often remind folks that my very first executive chef was a woman. My very first sous chef was a woman. So I've had a great deal of appreciation for what women have had to deal with in the industry. People of color, for those of you who don't know, I'm of mixed race. My mother's Cuban and my dad's was American or American born, although I don't necessarily look like it. So I can pass on the privilege of my color, but it's still, one of these things where I've, been the butt of many jokes, all the way back to, elementary school and back into the profession. But I would often hear, really shitty comments by other people, as they're confiding in me, not necessarily them realizing that, I have this respect for the women in the industry as well as people of color. And for a long time, I would just kind of sit there and go, yeah, okay, cool, and not really stand up. And it took me taking a job as an executive sous chef at a huge resort, working under a very good friend of mine who needed some help in this particular organization. I hadn't been a sous chef for 20 years. But not to have that mantle of responsibility as being the executive chef freed me up to do stuff like run around and have 1,000 conversations a day with people. So very often the chef would come in and he'd lay down the law, and then I would, walk back in to these departments and kind of smooth everything over. And that's when I realized that communication is job one of our particular positions. And it becomes difficult when you're trying to communicate the same thing to maybe people of, certainly two different sexes, or now three or four different sexual orientations, all with their own history, all with their own um, family life, because it used to be that all we did was hire a pair of hands, or a position on the schedule. Okay, I need a grill cook for Saturday. Who am I going to put in there? And I think now it's turning towards, no, we hire full functional human beings, and we have to deal with them at that particular way, because to not be aware of what's going on in their personal lives sets us up to be kind of deaf or tone deaf to the same thing that affects us, you know? So it being part of Benchmark 60, and I guess I just wanted to say that out loud, but being part of Benchmark 60, we're bringing a particular different type of changing the perspective of a lot of operators, chefs, managers, DMs, so that they start looking at their staff as assets rather than as debits to the bottom line. And as someone who's working with this productivity metrics, what have you seen insofar as the way that that starts to shape an operator's viewpoint and how he or she starts treating their staff differently?
Yeah, well, I'm.
I know that's a big loaded question, dude.
Yeah. Where do I begin? The labor model hasn't really changed much. Like it really hasn't. It's been decades of the same 100 years, the same restaurant really model. And it started with the brigade system, but like, where has the innovation been? And like we our forefathers in the culinary world, like Escoffier, creating our brigade system, and there was a reason that they did that, and it was to try to create a better restaurant environment that everybody knew who was doing what by when, right? It was the first action plan, and I think we're overdue. We're well overdue to create a new action plan, a new who does what by when in the restaurant business, and I think the holistic approach at looking at the people, the number one commodity in your business, focusing on them and their happiness is just going to attract a better restaurant world. Like even selfishly, like let's create a better restaurant world so we have better restaurants to go to. It's since post-pandemic, it's the kind of the running joke. Like everything's just gotten a little bit worse, and it's because everybody's a little bit short-staffed, everybody's a little tired, everybody's stressed out, everybody's worried about money and inflation, all these things. And so the key is really just like remembering that it's not a grill cook, it's a person, it's the people that you work with, and you ask them what they want and find out how to get it, and just make a better space, a better environment, somewhere that's attractive to work. And I think it's less of like we're not doing them a favor by getting them to come work for us. It's the other way around, right? And we need them, or else we don't make profit. We don't have the business. And so with Benchmark 60, taking a holistic approach by looking at it a little bit differently, working like focusing on workload and really focusing on the people will also not only make us as profitable as we always have been, but create a better work environment. And then, with everybody crying labor shortage, you don't have to cry labor shortage if you get to keep the people that you have. And then they're out there telling everybody how great of a workspace they've got. And then that'll just attract more talent, and then everybody wins.
Yep. I know Benchmark 60's famous tagline is retention is the new cool. And for those who are maybe not necessarily familiar with what that actually means, is that retention is actually focusing on retention is step one in creating not only a great workplace culture and community, but it also becomes a point of attraction for those out on the street that are actually looking for a place to be treated well. Now, everybody knows what happened during the pandemic. We lost millions and millions of jobs. Some folks went to other industries. Some folks did not come back. But, the Burnt Chef Project did a survey not too long ago that said that, 64% of everybody who left the industry planned on coming back within the next 12 to 18 months. So these are people who obviously love the industry, love what they do, but they just couldn't put up with the bullshit any longer. So first off, I think we got to say a big shout out, thank you to them, and for standing for what they believed in, because that has woken up a whole lot of people who perhaps were, again, kind of tone deaf to the cries or the demands of the associates when they were like, things have to get better. Well, that's why I love calling, COVID the great reset. It wasn't the great resignation, it's the great reset. And it's our responsibility, if we're wary enough, to actually do something about it. That's what so charged me up about my first conversations with Jim and this productivity metrics, because I realized that this was kind of the back door to showing operators, number one, that you don't have to give up profit. You don't have to give up margins. That actually this is an opportunity for you to realize money that's just being left on the table, right? That you can capture and then reinvest in your people. So I think that that's probably one of the most revolutionary things that I'd heard in a long time, and realized that a lot of the conversation around community culture and all that kind of stuff actually begins with management who are invested in really looking at their staff, managing their workload better, and then communicating that to the staff in such a way that they get it. Holy crap, man, this company really cares. Because there are very few metrics for like, oh yeah, we really care about you. Oh yeah, sure. Uh-huh. And now I'm just gonna have to put my head down and just keep crunching again. So because that's the only way to get through it. And I know that there are some folks out there in the industry who are gonna listen to this and think it's all pie in the sky. Right? Oh, really? You're going to give servers benefits, shit like this? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. If you can find that cash, why wouldn't you do that? Like, what would be, in your mind, an objection from an operator who wouldn't want to take care of their people better?
Yeah, I think where some of it comes from is that like our own past experience. Like when I was a line cook, I didn't get benefits. I made $10 an hour. I did, I worked ridiculous hours. I didn't get paid overtime. Like, and I think some of that comes, some of the decision making from now the now restaurant owners, is some of that comes from that past shared experience. Like why shouldn't this person have to fight to the top the same way I did? And it's just broken, really. Like it's not that's not the way that our new workforce is going. They're not going to accept those things the same way that we did and unfortunately did, right? And we just need to come up with new ways to make them happy, really. And in the end, it's just it's one simple sentence: it's cheaper to keep the people you have.
Do you know what the average is in Canada right now for having to hire and train staff on average? Do you know?
Like the average cost kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I would say like anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 an employee, and then as an investment to get them in, train them. Depending on the operation, that could be less or depending also on the position as well. But it's always it's a risk. Like you're now all of a sudden hiring somebody you don't know, and you have to try to suss them out and figure them out and find out what makes them tick. And although like there's some easier ways to do that now, just by simply asking them what they want. But it's an investment to hire and train more people, and then that revolving door, you're just it's exponential at that point. So it's always the most successful restaurant groups that I've ever with, or I've had the pleasure of like chatting with, is that their pockets are deep with people. I've met vice presidents that started as dishwashers, and those are the companies that typically are the most successful, at least in my experience. They're the ones that are constantly have a rotating door, or the ones that are always struggling, and they're the ones typically who have the questions as how do we keep our people, or How do we find good people?
Right.
And often the answer is you already have them. You just need to invest in them. Yeah.
Can you talk quickly? And I know that we're getting short on time, but I don't want to rush you because I think this is really important. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that the industry itself is a little bit fractured and wonky on like how do you build skill sets that actually transfer to other markets. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, our industry, you can have a director of operations, for a small 2-unit business, and then you can have director of operations for a 30-unit business or director of operations for a hotel. Although they all fall within the hospitality industry, that's kind of what I was alluding to, is that their skill set, their education, their background, their ability to transfer those skills to another even hospitality group is, I think there's too much of a gap. There's not enough of a standard. There's, one operating system they become an expert on, so they're good at reading the data and understanding it and being able to communicate that with their teams. Once you transfer that, and I went through a little bit of this myself, even, is that once you move into a new group, a new culture, a new mission statement, and a new operating systems, and new PO or SOPs and all that, there's a learning curve that's steep, like extremely steep. And I think we should be focusing more on the education of those entry level partners, that we bring into our business, and spend the same level of investment. They're also expecting a higher level of pay. They're expecting benefits. They're expecting what all the other industries are. And if you look at other careers that you can take, you have to spend 4 years in university to do it. And what I would think is that just there needs to be more education in our business. There needs to be more standardization across like what these. I've hired people who are general managers and chefs and directors of operations, and they're not always the same. And which isn't a bad thing. And like new sets of eyes and new ideas is great,
Sure.
but it's like, will they be able to do the job? And that's the disconnect. And I think, the restaurant industry, to kind of comment on, transferable skills into maybe different businesses. I think restaurant operators typically are probably some of the best operators in any business, because we've been grown to be these jack of all trades. Like there's not a lot of office spaces where you got to come in and fix a dishwasher or fix the plumbing or put out a fire or deal with staff shortages. It's I think our abilities and our skill sets are so broad that it would be, I think, if we continue to invest in education and standardization of our industry, then we will be able to open up more and more doors for everyone.
And so that education piece, are you also referring to training? Like there's one thing about education, outside of the industry or prior to coming in the industry, but are we doing enough, at the unit level to train the people that we have? I mean, you talked about this retention, taking care of your good people. At what point does training become an imperative?
It's the most imperative thing to do. Like we should be like often, as operators, we can't see the forest for the trees. We're in the thick of it. We're just always in the weeds, really. and you're always busy, and you always got something better to do. And I think if we're not trying to train ourselves out of those things, then we're not going to grow our community. We're not going to grow our restaurant or our business. Like it's, that's what I teach everyone, is that don't do anything yourself that you can't teach, and take every moment and every opportunity to teach it. Also, they want it. They want to learn. They want more. They want advancement. And so you're going to just kill 2 birds with 1 stone there.
That's kind of going against the grain of the pride of somebody who's come up through the ranks, gotten their jacket with the embroidery on it. Now I'm the executive chef. Now I'm the apex predator in the fish tank. There are a lot of guys and gals out there that wouldn't necessarily train their people with all their special skills because they think it's job security.
Fear, yeah.
Which is a shame, because I've always felt that my job as the executive chef was to train myself out of a job.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's not too much job security, but how else are the people that I work with going to be able to have the skills to go on to become chefs in their own rights?
Yeah. Well, I mean, unless you're happy just being like having to do everything all the time, there's a part of it where I think for most leaders, there's a turning point in your career where you realize that you can't do it all. You can't do everything, and you're eventually going to burn out. And you're also going to get more out of the people that work with you than you can undo yourself. And it's just not an option. They want to learn, and I encourage everybody to ask why. And you should be trying to work yourself out of a job. That's also the only way that you're going to get yourself ahead. If you have an army of people all stepping the same direction as you, all believing the same mission statement, all fighting the same battle for you and with you, that's going to get you further ahead in your career than you will be by doing it yourself.
So what I'm hearing you say is it doesn't necessarily always have to mean back or hip or knee surgery or the birth of a child for you to smarten up and realize that there are better things to do with your time than being, tied to the stove.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, we have just a second left, and if you had just one little tidbit for our operators who are going to go back, into their restaurants or their kitchens, what's a little piece of wisdom that you can leave them with that maybe will cause them to change their perspective?
I think one of our biggest obstacles in this business is we're afraid of what our team members are going to say. I think what I often coach operators is that just ask them what they want. It's simple. Just go to them, ask them what they're looking for, ask them what they like about where they work and what it is that they want out of where they work. I think we're typically just too afraid of what the answer is going to be and not knowing how to do that. And I think if the more we have these conversations and the more that we spend our outreach and connect with more people, the better we are at answering those questions and the less fearful we have to be about asking them.
I think that's an excellent place to stop. And if someone wants to learn more about you and connect with you, how do they do that, Jonathan?
For sure. Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also part of the Benchmark 60 group. So you can reach me at jonathan@benchmark60.com or Jonathan Ruby on LinkedIn there. Love to connect.
Sounds perfect, man. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Turning the Table. And for those of you who are still with us, next week, we're going to have leadership development coach and mentor Allison Ann on as our guest. And I think Jim Taylor may or may not be back. I mean, if he's smart, he'll stay home, because we at Benchmark 60, yes, we also recognize that new dads get to have parental leave. We're on the cutting edge. Thanks very much, folks. We really appreciate you joining us. Please like, share, and comment, and we'll answer every single one. Thank you very much. Until next week.